The closer market is officially moving now that we've seen Tanner Scott and Kirby Yates come off the board, likely to sign his deal sometime later this week. Now we get Paul Sewald going to the Cleveland Guardians and new rumors surrounding Carlos Estevez. That and more ahead next here at The Upside. And welcome into the MLB Hot Stove Daily here at the Upside Sports Network. My name is Michael. Appreciate you guys joining us on a Wednesday evening. Hopefully you guys are having some fun out there, staying warm, all of those kinds of things. But we finally have some movement on the relief market, and it hasn't stopped even today. We got the signing over the past week anyway of Scott and Kirby Yates. Looks like his deal will become official later on this week once he gets that physical passed. Still curious to see what the numbers ultimately turn in on Kirby Yates. But today we get the signing of 1 year, $7 million for Paul Sewald. He looks like he'll be an 8th inning setup guy, at least for Emmanuel Clase out there in Cleveland. Good signing for them, as this will shorten the game a little bit for them. Now, Sewald isn't exactly as good as he once was, but he's still a solid option in a high leverage situation. So, good experience being brought in here by the Cleveland Guardians. The new rumors today around Carlos Estevez. We talked about the Cubs having interest in him yesterday. Well, now count the Cincinnati Reds in on the market for Carlos Estevez as well. Over the last 2 years, he saved 57 games. Obviously not a huge total, but you got to remember he spent much of that time with the Los Angeles Angels. He is a very good closer. He's a very good high leverage reliever as well. I would imagine if he goes to Cincinnati, he might function as an 8th inning setup guy or as a closer. They already have a good one there. And then in Chicago, he would definitely be their closer. They need somebody for those high leverage innings. They will add someone in that spot. Kenley Jansen is still available as well. There's several guys who you could use in the 8th, 9th inning that are still out there on the market. Now that we've finally seen Scott and Yates come off the board, Sewald today as well, we could see the rest of this boulder keep on rolling down the hill. Pitchers and catchers report in just a few weeks, so this free agent market is going to start coming down. Prices will continue to fall as players try to get on rosters before spring training begins. And this is the opportunity for teams like Pittsburgh and other small market clubs to jump on some opportunities in the marketplace. So we'll see what ultimately happens. Welcome in, everybody. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Follow us on X at UpsideSN and on Facebook, Upside Sports Network. Welcome in, Holly, VPCZX, Verlis, Robert, Maniac, John, Aiden. Appreciate all you guys joining us today. Who's next to sign? Right now, I would say it's still going to be the relief market. It's just continuing to churn right now. I would say Carlos Estevez looks like the most fervent action on his name. Now, of course, Kirby Yates still has to get his deal official. That one I think could easily happen at any point here. But he really went to the Rangers last year in an effort to try to win a World Series. He hadn't done that yet in his career, so that's why I think he signed with the Texas Rangers on a lower cost contract after having something to prove anyway on a 1-year, $4.5 million deal. Obviously, that was a great contract for Texas, one of the best relievers in the game last year, and ultimately looks like he's parlayed that into a nice contract with the Los Angeles Dodgers. Still waiting on those numbers, so hopefully we get some of those numbers later on in our show today. Robert, the longer Pete doesn't sign, the more I think he goes back. The longer he doesn't sign, the longer I just think it takes, honestly. I would have said the same, before they signed Jesse Winker, before they made it pretty much clear that they're looking to do something else with their free agent dollars, that they're still looking to add to their outfield rather than bringing back Pete Alonso. Now, I wouldn't rule it out entirely, but it's darn close to being a, door completely closed kind of situation on Pete Alonso and the Mets. I think he's got a nice option out there in Toronto. I think the Los Angeles Angels are trying to make a big splash, as much as I don't think that is the right move for them. We know the way that front office group there works. We know the way the ownership group there works as well. They want to make a big splash, and if there's a chance to do so, they will get it done as well. The Giants have kicked the tires on Alonso as well. There's a few other teams that could use a bat like him in their lineup. But I would guess right now the Toronto Blue Jays might be trying to do something there because Vlad Guerrero has already said he's willing and wants to move over to third base to start next year. If that means getting a high-profile player in there, you do anything you can to try to get Vlad Guerrero to sign long-term. And if he wants Pete Alonso, I don't understand the hesitation. Now, for me, if he doesn't want Pete Alonso, then I would get the hesitation. The defensive numbers don't look great on Alonso. Doesn't exactly hit for a great contact rate. Grounds into double plays all the time. But the one great ability he has, the one power he possesses, is to hit that ball over the fence in game. He doesn't just do it in batting practice. He's not just show muscle. He actually performs in the when the lights are brightest as well. And I think that skill is invaluable in today's game. Now, first base DH guys are usually not paid anymore. We've seen that for the last 5-10 years now, how first basemen are pretty much being relegated to, hey, you're either a multi-positional player or you have incredible numbers at first base, and if you don't have one of those two options, we're probably not going to sign you at least at the top of the market, and we might not even sign you at least to an active roster deal. You might have to take a spring invite and see if you can crack the roster out of spring training. We've seen that trend over the last 10 years. Some of the biggest free agent contracts that we've seen for first baseman over the last 10 years, Matt Olson, Freddie Freeman, and I'm sure I'm missing one or two others, but not a whole lot of guys are getting paid at first base anymore. So unless you have that one great ability, unless you have that defensive versatility as well, teams are not willing to sign you for the money you would hope for. So as far as Pete Alonso goes, he does have that one great ability. I think that will be a good thing for him. I think he's trying to reset the market a little bit. I think his agent is trying to reset the market a little bit for what a first baseman can be paid on the market. With Vlad Guerrero hitting free agency next year, I imagine they want to get that number even higher as well and build off of what Pete gets this year as well. John, Cubs were active today just before we came on the air. They agreed to a one-year deal with John Birdie. I believe it's a $2 million deal with $1.5 million in incentives. Kind of a versatile piece for them. Do I think this is the linchpin in this offense that gets this thing rolling in the right direction? No. Do I think this gives them some depth from some guys they've had to DFA over the last couple of weeks? Yes. Do I think this is the perfect move for this team? I don't. I still think there's more work to do first, I think they're going to try to address their needs in their bullpen. Again, we mentioned the Carlos Estevez possibility there. Kenley Jansen, among other possibilities as far as trader out there as well. Ryan Helsley, among others. We'll see which direction the Cubs go, but I think their first priority right now is try to add to the back end of that bullpen. And if by some miracle they still have some money left over, then they'll use it to add one more bat to this lineup. Or if there's an opportunity, like Alex Bregman is unable to find a fit out there that he likes, maybe they're the dark horse team for him, or they could be a dark horse team for Flaherty as well. Those are the things I'm keeping an eye on with the Chicago Cubs. Aiden, the market is going quiet now. Hope Bregman signs tomorrow. For me, the market still isn't quiet. We still saw a couple of more Major League signings today. This continues the streak of signings we've seen over the last 5 or 6 days now. And coming into 2025, there was about 150-ish free agents that were on the board. Slowly but surely, that number is dwindling. We're getting closer and closer to spring training, getting closer and closer to pitchers and catchers reporting, and we're finally seeing some of this market, ultimately find their homes on new teams. Michael, welcome in. Appreciate you joining us. What's next for the San Francisco Giants? What do you think? For me, the Giants, I think they did a great job turning the page from Farhan Zaidi. That was the number one priority for me if I was a Giants fan. They have to change the entire narrative around that team, and they did so. They brought in Willy Adames, 7 for 182. Then they miss on Corbin Burns. You wonder, is this the same old story once again? They quickly changed the narrative again, and a 1-year, $15 million deal for Justin Verlander. I think they've accomplished their number one goal this offseason, and that's to get rid of that stigma around their organization. Hey, we can't sign the big guy. We just take the consolation prize of whatever's left on the market and just make it do with it for 1 year until they decide that there's a better destination out there for them. Look at all the guys they've missed on. Bryce Harper, Manny Machado, Xander Bogaerts, Carlos Correa, Aaron Judge, and the list goes on and on and on. Look at the list of guys they have signed. Carlos Rodon, Kevin Gausman, Blake Snell, among several other guys that ultimately found their free agent destinations after they had one good year with the Giants. So this is a good turning of the page moment for the Giants, and I think they did a great job, moving on from that, Farhan Zaidi era. I love the signing of Verlander for them. Do I think he's going to be, Cy Young level Verlander anymore? No, but I still think he's got some quality left in that arm. I think he's got about maybe a 4.5 ERA, maybe a 5 ERA left in him, which at this point in Verlander's career, anything you get from me anyway would be pure gravy. His expertise that he can lend to those young pitchers in that rotation as well is going to be invaluable for a guy like Harrison in that rotation. I think having a guy like Verlander in there is going to really help mentor him and get him going on the right track. But San Francisco, as far as what their next step is going to be, I think it's mainly just kind of tinkering around the edges of this roster. Maybe a rental first baseman over there, Anthony Rizzo, we've discussed at length before. Paul Goldschmidt, before he ultimately signed with the New York Yankees anyway. He was my pick to end up there. I think Rizzo would be a good fit there with the Giants or with the Chicago Cubs as well. Welcome in, Master Vinman, Rafe, Willard, Liberty, Graham, Mark. Appreciate all you guys joining us this evening. Pete to San Francisco, what are your thoughts? They have a guy coming at first base, and I would rather go with a 1-year option at first base. That's been my thoughts all along for the Giants, because I'd rather keep my powder dry to go after next year's free agent class. Yes, it'll be more competitive with the teams like the Nationals having more spending money next year and finally entering the market for top-level free agents, and they have a really good relationship with Scott Boras as well, so you got to think they're going to land at least one of the top guys that are Boras clients next year. Then you look at in the division there, the Padres are going to have to re-sign a couple of guys, and if they don't, they'll have some money to spend. The Dodgers seem to just spend and spend and spend. Diamondbacks have a few guys that are going to be hitting free agency as well. They'll have some flexibility with their payroll that they may still add as well. But the Texas Rangers will have about $30 to $40 million coming off of their payroll. They'll have some money to spend. There's a lot of teams out there that are going to spend free agent dollars next year. Sure, this offseason looked great. Juan Soto gets the 15-year, $765 contract, and we're still seeing great, absolutely ridiculous numbers for relievers this offseason. But as far as what we could look for the Giants, I would expect them to try to go for a short-term option at first base to kind of complete their offseason, maybe a bullpen piece here or there. But in my mind, I think they're pretty much set with the roster that they've got right now. Judge on the Giants would be real fun right now. I mean, it would, but obviously it didn't happen. That was part of the misses of the Farhan Zaidi era. Master Vinman, do you think there's going to be an impact on player markets because of the Dodgers, meaning teams will overpay for mid-tier players? No, I don't. I think the market right now is coming back to the teams at the bottom of the list. You were talking about small market clubs like the Guardians finally spending a little bit in free agency, bringing in Paul Sewald. I think we could see a team like the Royals step out a little bit now in free agency. Sure, they were the number 2 spending team in free agency last year, but that was an aberration. They're more of the small market team, 1 year 3, 1 year 4 million type of contracts, and not at the top of the market like the Dodgers, the Yankees or the Mets. But I do think smaller market clubs are going to start picking up on some of those deals because free agents are starting to get a little antsy. This happens every year right around this time as we get closer to pitchers and catchers reporting and to spring training. You're going to see a lot of those guys take short-term, low-cost deals for these clubs. And I don't think we're going to see any of these players necessarily be overpaid outside of maybe the top-end guys. I don't think we're going to see a guy like, for instance, Max Scherzer get like $42 million. I think Scherzer might get in the neighborhood of 15 to 18, maybe 20 on the high end, but I don't think we're going to see him getting 40 per. We're not going to see Bregman get 40 per. We're going to see Bregman do very well in free agency. Maybe it's a short-term deal with a very high AAV. That's a possibility, but I think he's going to be able to get that long-term deal that he's been looking for. Tigers seem to have hit a little bit of a stalemate with him, even though both sides want to get a deal done. But it looks like the Red Sox might be there financially. The Blue Jays certainly are there financially as well. I would expect Bregman to do a little bit better than the Willy Adames contract, 7 for $182. Willard, heard anything on the Astros or free agency or trade or no? I heard a little bit on the Astros. They're actually kicking the tires officially now on Jurickson Profar. Blue Jays are still in that market as well. The Mets have kicked the tires on it. And, of course, the San Diego Padres. But that's kind of where their priority is right now, is trying to add an outfielder after losing Kyle Tucker in that trade to Chicago. They still haven't filled that void. And they're trying to do it on a shoestring budget. Remember, the threshold this year is at $241 million. They're currently at $244. They're looking to offload a little bit of salary and still add an outfielder as well. Trying to, walk and chew gum. We'll see if they can complete that. The other thing they're trying to get done this offseason is try to get an extension done with Framber Valdez before they get to spring training. That looks unlikely to get done by that point. And if it doesn't get done, do they then turn their thoughts to what could they get in return for Framber Valdez instead of losing him for nothing in free agency, just like they did with Kyle Tucker? We'll have to keep our eyes peeled on the Houston Astros. But until that contract extension deadline there with the start of spring training passes, I think he stays a member of the Houston Astros. If he's not signed to an extension by that point, I think the club has to do the right thing and at least start taking calls on Framber Valdez and just see what the market would really bear for him. If they can't find an offer to their liking, I'd be just fine with them holding on to him throughout the year because I think they have a chance to be able to re-sign him once he hits free agency. I don't think he's going to get a Garrett Cole level contract or a Justin Verlander level contract or any of these top level guys that have left over the years. Now, maybe I'm wrong, but I still think Framber Valdez is a pitcher probably in that $30 million range, maybe over 5 years. That's at the very top of the Astros budget that they'd be willing to spend, which is why I wouldn't necessarily think it's an automatic that they trade him if they can't get that extension done. But that's something to keep an eye on for the Houston Astros. Liberty, when does Flaherty sign with who? I would say sometime in the next week. I think the Blue Jays are pushing for a starting pitcher. They've been connected to Nick Pivetta. They've been connected to Max Scherzer and with Jack Flaherty. I think they end up with at least one of those pitchers there. They may surprise us and add 2 of those, but I think the best of that group is clearly Jack Flaherty. I think Nick Pivetta should have signed that qualifying offer with the Boston Red Sox. And to most of the insiders out there, they haven't even heard of a team offering Nick Pivetta a contract to this point in free agency. He may have to, sign a 1 year $8 and 1 year $9 million deal like we saw Ian Desmond sign with the Texas Rangers all those years ago. And if that happens, man oh man, was that a miscalculation by Nick Pivetta. I'm sure he was looking for at least a multi-year deal, something in the neighborhood of what Tyler Anderson got with the Los Angeles Angels, say 3 for $39. I think he'd have been very happy with that contract. But with the numbers he's put up and with the injury red flags around him, not exactly the most surefire case to perform well next year, and you can understand why he might still be hanging out there, especially with compensation still attached to him as well. Graham, the Birdie signing could be a sign they're concerned over Horner. over Horner. It's absolutely a sign they're concerned over Horner because remember, he's not expected to start the season now with the Chicago Cubs. I think this is some depth signing for them to at least have a major league ready option there rather than forcing one of their young kids up to the major leagues before they're necessarily ready. Mark, you think Texas might be interested in Brazier? Gives them another closer type. Ryan Brazier? Is this the same guy the Rangers had in their minor league system 3 years ago? I think it was 3 years ago. I mean, I don't think so. I think they're looking at bigger fish right now. If I were, the Texas Rangers, I'd be looking the trade market for Helsley. I'd be looking the trade market for Duran. In free agency, I'd be looking at Kenley Jansen. I'd be looking at Carlos Estevez before I get to the Brazier level. And even if it got to that level, I don't think they would do something like that, mainly because I think they like their options in-house, and that will allow them to keep their powder dry so that when they get to the trade deadline and another closer on one of these teams that doesn't perform quite as well as they had hoped might become available, and then they could strike while the iron is hot at that point with the money they would have saved by not spending it at this point right now. If so, what would Texas have to give up? You got to be talking about somebody else other than Ryan Brazier. Let me know, Mark. No matter what, there's always an Upside Sports Network. Welcome in, Hank. Appreciate you joining us once again. Angels news or rumors? Well, they did sign Tim Anderson, former All-Star shortstop for the Chicago White Sox, to a minor league deal with an invite to spring training. I think this probably takes them out of the market for Yoan Moncada. Not that he's going to break through anyway, but for me, the Angels, I like the signing of them bringing in Tim Anderson. They've been connected to him in years past as well. The Angels, to me, just need to try to get low-cost veterans on that roster to kind of help shepherd the young guys through. And if things work out, then you can peddle them at the deadline for some future assets, some prospects, or something along those lines. But as far as the Angels right now, I think all eyes are on them to quote unquote make a big splash, as Artie Moreno has made that a institutional mandate there to see if they can add something big, get some respectability back in their organization. I get the reasons why he wants to do it. I just think it's a completely wrong decision to make at this point in time. Willard, any news on the Astros signing free agents or trade for anyone? We just discussed that one. The Astros are looking at Jerks and Profar to sign in free agency. They're also looking to decrease their payroll structure right now. They're trying to save at least $3 million to duck underneath the tax. And then they're going to have to save a little bit more based on whoever they bring in for that outfield, whether it's a Randall Grichuk type at around $4 million or Profar around $9-10 million. They're going to have to offset that salary as well to dip beneath the tax threshold as well. Master Vinman, is Robertson worth the risk for the Cubs given he's 40? Absolutely. He's still been very consistent. He was lights out last year. You remember in back-to-back games last year, he struck out Betts, Freeman, and Ohtani. 1, 2, 3 in those innings. Robertson still has a lot left in the tank, and I think he's still best served as an eighth-inning option with some availability to close if you have an injury in your ninth-inning role. But counting on him for 162 games as a closer, day in, day out, that would be a little much, I think, on his shoulders. Not that he couldn't handle it, but I think you'd be better served by having a better option back there and utilizing Robertson, in a 6th, 7th, 8th as a fireman to whatever the big inning is coming up. For instance, if you have Mookie, Freeman, and Ohtani coming up in the 7th, that's when you use him. If they come up in the 8th, that's when you use him. If they come up in the 6th in a big situation with runners on, then you use him at that point. I think Robertson is a very good fireman out of that bullpen for anybody at this point. Aiden, you think Bregman to the Yankees is possible, or will the Yanks go differently at third base? I would have loved to see the Yankees bring in Alex Bregman. I think he'd be the impact bat that they absolutely need to bring in. However, they are understandably hesitant to do so because of their tax situation, trying to stay underneath the Steve Cohen tax, and they're trying to offload Marcus Stroman's deal. Now, if they were able to successfully offload his salary, maybe they can find a way to shoehorn that deal in by backloading the deal, but I don't think they have any interest in doing something like that. I think they've moved on from Alex Bregman about a month ago now. As much as I would have liked to see Bregman go there, I don't think there's any real possibility that happens. Owen, appreciate you joining us. John Heyman said that if Pete Alonso goes to Toronto, Max Scherzer will sign there. Interesting. Interesting. I think Scherzer wants to compete first and foremost. If he thinks your team has a chance to go to the World Series, he's going to have interest in signing with you. Now, maybe there's some appeal to playing in Toronto, playing for entire country, that kind of thing as well. But the primary motivation anyway for Max Scherzer has always been and will remain to win a World Series. So if they were able to bring in Pete Alonso, that obviously would make them a better situation, a better wild card contending team, in my opinion. I don't think it makes them a favorite to get to the top of the division. I don't think it makes them a favorite to even get to the World Series, but it would certainly help. And at that point, maybe Scherzer would have interest at that point. But I like the signing of Anthony Santander. But for me, the whole offseason for Toronto, as I mentioned last night, begins and ends with whether or not they can get Vladimir Guerrero Jr. signed long term. Heard a rumor that you are leaving Upside for the Dodgers. Pretty much everybody is, aren't they? But no, I will be staying right here. I will not be joining any team officially at any point. Graham, what you have just said on D-Rob, I agree with, and I would love for him to come here to the Bronx. He is the answer if we can't get a lefty arm. I think he's the answer even if you get a lefty arm, because I think you're still going to get one of those guys, a Tim Hill, Andrew Chafin type of pitcher that you can use as a lefty out of the bullpen, and then still bring in David Robertson as well. Something like that. Remember, I told you this offseason, the Yankees would do well to find themselves an eighth inning option. I thought Scott was a really good fit as a lefty and an eighth inning option for them. Obviously, they didn't get that done. Robertson would be a cheaper option than Scott in free agency, so maybe that would work better into the financial structure of what the Yankees are looking for this year. But for the Yankees, adding a lefty arm, I think, is their first priority right now. If they can add another piece like a Robertson, I think that would be pure gravy at this point. I don't expect it, though, at the moment. Alrighty, let's go ahead and check in on X and see if anything else is happening this evening. Not too much actual news today. We did get the news of Paul Sewald going to the Cleveland Guardians. There's the news on the Cincinnati Reds talking with Carlos Estevez. I think he would be a good option for them. They need to have some improvement in that bullpen and in that pitching staff. Shortening the game a little bit by having Diaz back there and Estevez would work well in that ballpark. I'd like to see that move. Cubs are said to have heavy interest as well. I'm sure the Rangers are going to kick the tires on him now that Yates has decided to move on to the Los Angeles Dodgers. Maybe the Rangers try to sneak in there and snake away Kirby Yates before he actually signs on the dotted line, but I doubt it at this point. But we'll see where Estevez lands. I think he lands on one of the teams that I mentioned there for him: the Rangers, the Reds, the Cubs. Pretty much any of these teams that could use a eighth inning setup guy or a closer. I think Estevez would be a good option there. Mike Doyle, welcome in. Dodgers want to trade Gosselin. He's a good fit for the Tigers. I have not heard any Tony Gonsolin notes yet, so if you wouldn't mind sending us that, I'd greatly appreciate it. But the Dodgers are certainly going to be using some of those guys like Gonsolin in their starting staff to begin the season. And why is that? Because they're going to have Ohtani not pitching to start the year. They're going to have Clayton Kershaw on the 60-day IL when he does get back to the club anyway. And for the Dodgers, this is a really good team, a well-built team right now. Every time you say, well, they couldn't possibly afford any more guys, they go out and sign 3, 4, 5 more guys to big-time contracts with signing bonuses, deferrals, all that kind of thing. Hopefully they can close that up in free agents, or close that up in the next CBA as far as the deferrals, or at least put a little bit more stringent definition on what you can and can't do with those deferrals. But the Dodgers, I think that they shouldn't be ruled out on anything at this point. I made the point yesterday anyway, that they keep telling us all offseason long they don't have the money for Nolan Arenado. They don't have the flexibility on the roster to get something like that done. I call hogwash on that at this point. How many times have we seen them add and add and add and add and add and add after saying they were out on Nolan Arenado because of the finances? How many times have we seen them add middle infielders, corner infielder types in this offseason, or move around some of those guys as well? Just in this offseason period with Nolan Arenado still sitting out there. I think Nolan Arenado would be a great fit for that lineup, especially if Freddie Freeman has some struggles after recovering from offseason surgery. I would love to see what they can do with that team if they were to bring in Nolan Arenado to kind of keep that team, up from a offensive perspective. But that rotation, probably the best in the game when healthy. That bullpen right now, if Kirby Yates does actually get done there, I think that's definitely the best bullpen in the game as well. And they probably have the best lineup, but it is more top heavy than anything else. Bringing in Nolan Arenado would lengthen out that lineup a little bit, and that's something I think the Dodgers would really be wise to utilize. Now, as far as the what it would take, I think getting the Cardinals to bite down on quite a bit of that deal is the primary motivation for them not bringing him in yet. And as much as they put lip service into saying he wouldn't fit, there's no room for him, they could easily trade one of those middle infielders that they have. Rojas would make some sense. Chris Taylor would make some sense. Maybe even just pay down those contracts just to get them off your roster, give yourself some flexibility, and bring in a former all-star third baseman in Nolan Arenado. You could play him a little bit at third, play him a little bit at DH, play him a little bit at first base if Freeman is not ready to go. But I think the Dodgers would be wise to do something like that. Robertson would indeed take pressure away from Weaver and in some ways from Williams. He is still a nasty arm. I agree. We'll probably not move on him, but I would still like it. I agree with you there, Graham. I do like Weaver, but I like him being used as a fireman as well. You can never have too many of those high leverage relief arms. And for me, Williams is your guy in the ninth. And then you have Weaver preferably in the eighth, but I'd rather have him, for the best part of the lineup for whenever they come up, if that's the sixth, seventh, or eighth. But then I'd like to have another proven option I can trust in that eighth inning role when I use Weaver in the sixth to face the heart of the Dodgers order with the bases loaded. To get me out of that jam, I'd rather use Weaver in that situation and then put Robertson in there in the eighth inning role, and I'd feel very confident about my bullpen heading into the year. Graham, in my opinion, be a lot of speculation as to who the Dodgers are going to move. They need space on the 40-man, and yes, they are Arenado, and not the saving money. I'm like, seriously, yes, that's kind of my points as well. They could easily move on from Rojas there. They could easily move on from Taylor. There's a few other guys on the back end of that roster that they could move around as well. They're going to have some of those players be pushed onto the 60-day IL to give them some flexibility. There's all kinds of ways they can manipulate that roster to getting it to the best active roster they can, utilizing that injured list, utilizing all the spots on that 40-man as well. I don't buy any of the arguments the Dodgers have made now about their lack of interest, or the reasons for lack of interest anyway, in a guy like Arenado. Months behind, welcome in. I think this is definitely the first time we've seen you in our chat. Really do appreciate you guys joining us. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe. But your comment there, why do the Reds want Estevez? They have a closer. Well, you can never have too much bullpen help. You can never have too many starters. That's the old adage in baseball. And when you look at Estevez, they have a younger guy at their closer spot. If things don't work out, if he struggles, then they'd have a proven option to step back there. Also, it shortens the game. Right now, the Reds are struggling to get deep into games with their starting pitching. So go about it a different way. Try to build out the back end of that bullpen and try to shorten the game for those pitchers who can't get quite as deep into the game. That's why they're still looking to bring in some length in that rotation. They're looking at guys like Lance Lynn, among others, to help out in that rotation as far as eating some innings. But Estevez would be a great option to shorten the game there. The thought process would be the same for Robertson going to the Yankees or wherever he might go in an eighth inning setup role, or with Kirby Yates going to the Los Angeles Dodgers. Shortening the game always works at the back end of that bullpen. You remember back in the 2015, 2016, 2017 Yankees bullpen when they had Zach Britton, Miller, Chapman, Betances, Robertson. They had all kinds of different options in the back end of that bullpen over the years, and they just built out super bullpen after super bullpen. And I think we've kind of gotten away from that over the last 5, 6, 7 years, but I think teams will start trying to do so once again, and we'll see where he goes. Hank spent money on cards, got some Gabriel Moreno and Dane Dunning rookie autos. Very nice, very nice. Dane Dunning was one of my favorite rookies back when he was with the Nationals, and then with the Chicago White Sox, and then when he came over to Texas, I was thrilled. Obviously, it hasn't worked out quite as well as I had hoped, but I would love to have a rookie card of his, especially a rookie auto. That's really nice. Gabriel Moreno could still be a very nice card in the years ahead, depending on how he goes into 25 this year. Master Vinman, Jurickson Profar to the Padres. That's been the thought process all offseason, but the Blue Jays and Astros are two teams that have been connected with him over the past week as well. The Detroit Tigers have also checked in on his market over the last week as well. Graham, there might as well be a few current Dodgers players getting a tad nervous that they might be on the move. Like, don't make long-term rentals in a house. Traveling LA to Florida is a pain. Well, I mean, the Marlins do have to add some payroll, so I get your note there. So maybe they would be a fit for a guy like Chris Taylor. Maybe they would waive him and just utilize the roster space there and just say thanks for taking up some of our salary so we don't have a grievance filed against us by the MLBPA. That would be a possibility there. Cubby, appreciate you joining us once again. Birdie to the Cubs, season saved. I don't know about that. I would say that Birdie to the Cubs gives them at least an option at second with Nico Horner not expected to start the season with the Cubs. You got his Topps Chrome Orange of 25, PSA 10. That's a pretty dang good card. I remember when I went to a sports card shop here locally about 45 minutes away. I was usually I don't like going to sports card shops. They usually are a little overpriced, but I took advantage of an opportunity to get a Obsidian Evan Carter to 25 auto, graded it, and came back 10 as well. And I'm hoping Evan Carter gets back to the status he once had. That's one card I have high hopes for. Would have loved to have a Wyatt Langford, but they didn't have one quite to that rarity, so I passed on the ones that I saw. Graham, did you see the O's owner talking about about a salary cap? Yeah, I'm not sure if it's necessarily going to be strike talk, but I think it could be a lockout coming in 27. That's when owners might lock out the players and say, hey, until we get this salary cap in place, we're not starting a baseball season. That's the big worry for 27, but I think it's still a little bit early to be talking about salary caps at this point because the Players Association, I don't think, is ever going to go for it. And a work stoppage, I think, would be the worst thing you could do to Major League Baseball right now. We've seen how badly work stoppages have hurt in the past, and if you were to miss a whole season right now, because that's probably what it would take to get that salary cap in there, I don't see that being a benefit to the league rather than having played a 27 season. So which is more valuable to them, having a salary cap for years to come, or playing the 27 season and not having a salary cap? Playing the 27 season, not having a salary cap, adjusting the rules around the say deferred money, adjusting rules around how revenue sharing works, how it's distributed. Maybe setting a salary floor for some of these smaller market teams would be another thing that they could look into as well. Stiffer penalties on the tax threshold is something they could look at. Extra picks for teams that are at the smaller market level that can utilize those picks a little bit better. Looking at compensation as well for players that aren't offered a qualifying offer. Looking into seeing how they can improve that system. All of those are better options to me than going about a work stoppage and trying to get a salary cap, which may or may never be agreed to by the Players Association, and the work stoppage would certainly be the worst thing for the sport, period. Michael, do you see the Yankees trying to get a bargain second base or third baseman, maybe somebody like Polanco coming off of a down year, or somebody like Moncada or retread on Birdie? Well, Birdie just signed with the Cubs. He won't be going to the Yankees. Polanco, to me, I would rather just go with the young guys and maybe bring in a platoon advantage like Jose Iglesias rather than somebody who's well past his prime and would be better served as a bench role on my roster if I'm the New York Yankees. I would have no interest in Polanco. The only way I'd be going after Polanco is if I couldn't, if I didn't have a long-term answer at third base or second base or wherever I wanted to play him, and the option I did have to start the year at that spot got hurt, and then maybe in a pinch I could use a guy like Polanco, but I think we've seen the best of Polanco's career. As far as Moncada, I think he's going to go somewhere else. Teams like the Cubs have interest, Angels have had interest, Tigers have interest. If I had to guess right now with the money issues around Alex Bregman and the Tigers, I would say they end up settling on Yohan Moncada. Maybe they get Profar as well, but they're seemingly not willing to go to the top of the market for Bregman because of how uncomfortable they've been with the long-term deals in the past. Jordan Zimmerman obviously comes to mind. That didn't work out for them. Miguel Cabrera, the final 5-6 years of his deal did not work out either. Then you get the worst one of them all in Javi Baez. So they've been stung 3 different times by big contracts, and they're trying not to be stung once again by Alex Bregman. Graham, if Arenado does or is likely to go to the Dodgers, Castro might be the move for the Yankees. The Twins are looking at the possibility of trading Willie Castro there. Maybe he could be an option for the Yankees. Maybe Jose Miranda would be an option as well. But I would say Arenado ultimately will get traded before the start of the season. Maybe it's to the Dodgers. Maybe it's to another team who has an injury at third, first, or DH. But I do believe Arenado will start the season on some other team other than the Cardinals. Graham, the game needs a salary floor, not a cap. That's kind of my thought process. Players Association would be much more comfortable with having a salary floor than a cap. Maybe you just have stronger deterrence as far as going to certain levels as far as spending, and as long as you're willing to pay the taxes on it, as long as you're willing to have certain restrictions as far as movement in trades, as other signings, maybe that's something they could look into. For instance, the way the NBA uses the first apron and the second apron, something like that could come into play for Major League Baseball. That would be a little bit more of a deterrent as well. Let's see here, Master Vinman, how much are the New York Yankees willing to take on that Stroman contract if traded? Right now, I'd say the Yankees are hoping to get rid of that contract in its entirety. If they have to attach an asset to it, so be it. But I think they'd rather move off of that contract entirely rather than hold on to a few million to make it more palatable to another team to take on that salary. I think they'd rather attach a couple of top, 18, top, 20, 25 prospects to that trade in order to get Stroman off their roster. And I think they're going to have to do that because he has negative value right now. So trading Stroman, you'd probably have to attach, say, two guys, at the back end of your top 30 to be able to offload that salary. Maybe they can find a bigger taker out there to take on some of the other big contracts that they have. DJ LeMahieu comes to mind. Maybe a team like the Marlins or the Angels could take advantage of the situation and try to get as many prospects as they can out of the Yankee system in order to take on the money of those guys. And then the Yankees could utilize that space and bring in a guy like Bregman, bring in a guy like Arenado, or whoever they decide they want to add to the back end of that bullpen, like a Robertson or whoever else they want to do. But that'd be one way the Yankees could get creative with offloading that Stroman contract. Your internet quit? Well, we did lose our power today. For some reason, the construction companies that are building houses around us decided to flip our power off in the middle of the day when we were literally about to go live. And so I could not do our morning live on like I usually do when I'm off today. So I apologize for not doing our live then. But every night I told you guys, come hell or high water, we will be live here at the Upside. So make sure you guys hit that subscribe button. And we'll keep you guys up to date on all the latest from MLB's Hot Stove and throughout the regular season. Rafe, all those years the Rangers sucked and I never wanted a salary floor. Don't put one in now that they are competing for rings. Well, I mean, I still like having good competition out there. I don't want the Rangers just to be handed the award, to be handed the World Series trophy. Like, for instance, the Dodgers right now, as good as a team as they are, I don't think Dodgers fans just want to be handed the trophy either. I think they want to go out there and prove how good of a team they are, showcase the talent that they have, and win it on their own merit, rather than just be handed the trophy. Now, for a salary floor, I get it. That would increase the ability of some of these smaller market teams to add some extra talent, add some extra, incentives for these players to, wait in free agency, see if they can get a better deal if their team's trying to reach a salary floor rather than teams trying to mitigate their overall cost, try to stay underneath a certain dollar amount because they're trying to maximize the most of their, revenue sharing. For instance, the Marlins, their whole business plan is operated about that revenue sharing. And if they can't make a profit with just that revenue sharing and their in-stadium revenue, then they're not going to do anything. For instance, that's part of, they were interested in Nick Castellanos. That's part of the reason why they didn't get that deal done and why Derek Jeter left that organization. Graham, the floor is a halfway house and not as likely to upset as trying to put in a cap. The players' union will swallow a floor more easily. Yes, they will, because again, it will add salaries, add payroll to clubs, and as long as salaries continue to rise for players, that's something the Players Association is obviously going to go for. Verlis, giving up multiple draft picks and upping the tax payout would be a great deterrence on overspending. Yes, but they already do some parts of that. But I think they could add a little bit more deterrence there. Maybe do something as far as, what types of moves that you can make once you're over a certain salary threshold like the NBA does. For instance, if you're over the second apron in the NBA, you can't take on more salary in a trade. You can only trade equal salaries or lose salary in the trade to make it more, to make your salary situation work a little bit better. But, a team, say the Dodgers wanted to make a trade at the deadline for a $30 million player. If we apply those same rules that we see in the NBA to what we would have in MLB, You couldn't take that $30 million contract and trade, say, 3 guys that are worth $10 million to make it work. If there was a quote-unquote cap. You'd have to be able to trade like salary for like salary. So if you are trying to get a $30 million player, you'd have to trade a $30 million player going out or even more salary. So I don't see that happening right now, but that would be something that MLB could look into as far as a way to deter some of these big-time payrolls from really happening. Just limit the number or limit the types of transactions that they can make. Let's see here. Sean, welcome in. Appreciate you joining us once again. D-Rod, welcome back. Welcome back. Are the Cubs interested in Kenley Jansen, and is John Birdie the only bat they sign? I think it all depends on how much they spend in that closer spot, Sean. I think they're looking at Carlos Estevez. I think they're looking at Kenley Jansen. I think they get one of those guys, honestly. Say they get Kenley Jansen 2 years for $16 million. Kenley Jansen still got a little bit left in the tank. Maybe a Craig Kimbrell could be a fit there. But they are looking for a closer first and foremost. Once they get that closer done, then I think they'll go back to trying to add a bat. And I do think they'll add at least one more before the start of the regular season. Doing pretty good today, D-Rod. Graham, do you think they will make an attempt to put in place some form of guide rails on deferred contracts? I think they'll put a hard limit on deferred contracts, like say $100 million at any time for your deferred contracts. And the ones that are already done, those will be grandfathered in, meaning the Dodgers have over that $100 million already. They don't have to offload those deals, but they certainly can't add more until they're back underneath, say, $100 million in deferred contracts. That's something that we could see there as well. D-Rod, if there's a floor, there will also be a cap. Won't have one without the other. Honestly, I think you could. I think it would be far easier to get a floor, and that's why you could get something like that done. But the impetus for the teams to get that salary floor in there, they'd get the Players Association to give them, say, an international draft. That would be kind of the give and take there. To give or to get, you have to give. And so, as much as they're trying to get as much as they would love to have a salary cap, that's a non-starter. That's never going to happen. Even if they lost a whole season of Major League Baseball, I still don't think the Players Association would agree to something like that. Now, a salary floor, Players Association would absolutely love that because that means more money being spent by some of these smaller market teams. And because there's no cap, that still means the players are getting paid really, really well. Now, in order to get that salary floor, the commissioner may ask for harder deterrence on spending at the upper levels, harder tax rates, the restrictions on the second apron in the NBA that I just mentioned, something like that we could see being asked of the MLB Players Association to put in place for some of those teams that do spend at that level. That's something we could see as well. Other things that we could see them, like I just mentioned, the international draft. There's lots of different issues that the owners and Players Association are going to have to sort out. By my count, there's like 12, 13 big ticket items that, once you get to a CBA negotiation, if you have more than, say, 3 or 4, you're usually going to be headed to a work stoppage. We only have 2 years until the CBA runs out, and so it looks like we could be heading towards a lockout in 27 unless they start making some headway on these issues right now. Scratching your head at people thinking the Dodgers are a shoo-in to the World Series. They are the favorites on paper, but a shoo-in, I think that would be a bit of an overstatement, so I'm agree with you there, Graham. You can only win one World Series at a time, absolutely. Rafe, the Dodgers have like $1.57 billion in deferred money, I believe, according to an article I read. I know they passed the billion. I don't think they're up to another $500 million, though. I know they have quite a bit of money in deferred contracts already on their roster. I hadn't seen anywhere that had gotten up to 1.57, maybe 1.2, 1.3, but that's an extra $200 million than I thought they had. But either way, that's still crazy numbers. Over $1 billion in deferred money. Any way you slice it is way too much, and Major League Baseball should do something about it in the next CBA. All right, let's go ahead and check out one more time, see if anything else is happening. This one comes from Dan Hayes. He is the Twins beat reporter for MLB.com. Talks have slowed, but sources tell me, Dennis Lin, that the Minnesota Twins and Padres have discussed a trade sending catcher Christian Vazquez to San Diego. Now, that one's an interesting one. I knew the Twins were looking to save a little bit of money. They're looking for anybody to take on the contract of Christian Vazquez, especially after they acquired Diego Cartaya, the former top prospect from the Los Angeles Dodgers. I'm sure they would love to have, his roster spot available for Cartaya to make his major, or to at least break through with the club this year. But Christian Vasquez, at the number that he's on, about $10 million, I'd imagine the Twins would have to attach an asset to him. Either that or get some of that money to be eaten by the Twins. But San Diego, they're always looking for catching help there in San Diego. But we'll see what the Twins do with Christian Vasquez. Let's see here. The point you just made on paper, very different in reality. Okay. Let's see here. Master Vinman, could desperate teams needing pitching take a PR hit and sign Bauer? Bauer's never happening. I still think he would have been a great option, say 2 years ago, but he's been 4 years away from the major leagues at this point, 4 years and counting. That's way too long. I don't even think he'll get a workout with some of these clubs anyway. I think that just getting a workout would create all kinds of headlines, and I don't think teams, owners, front offices are looking for headlines at this point in free agency. As much as I think Bauer got a raw deal and probably should have been back in major leagues by now, I just don't think it's going to happen. He's pitching to guys like Hank Conger and Nomar Mazara, who are no longer in the big leagues. And as much as I liked Nomar Mazara at the time, he's no longer in the league for a reason. He didn't hit enough to stay on a major league roster, and ultimately is playing in the Mexican League. So I think Bauer's time in Major League Baseball is over. Twins and Padres talking about Christian Vasquez trade. Thoughts? That's kind of what we were just talking about, Ray. Perfect timing, yes. Who are your Super Bowl picks? Right now, I would still say the Chiefs because, again, they just know how to win in those close situations. I'm not going to give you guys the refs give them the games because in crunch time, it's like 48 penalties to 48 penalties each way. Now, the Chiefs have really not been the light 'em up Chiefs that they were when they had Tyreek Hill. But they have found a way to perform when the situation calls for it. Getting a blocked field goal key, during the regular season to win a game. Yes, they've had some calls go their way, but they've also had some calls go against them. And I think the refs are far more aware of it now than they should be. And so I think that it might go back the other way as far as having some calls go against the Chiefs and have the benefit of the doubt given to the defenders, given to the Bills, rather than the Chiefs getting the benefit of the doubt there. Let's see here. But my Super Bowl picks, I'll say Chiefs, and I'll go ahead and pick the Eagles just because, Saquon Barkley just looks unstoppable this year. But to win it, I'm still going to say the Chiefs. Until they lose, I'm going to pick the Chiefs at this point. Let's see here. I meant about the Dodgers being a shoo-in. Yes. Okay. Twins interested in Cease. Thoughts? 1 year left on Dylan Cease. That's a little bit surprising. I did not see the Twins' interest in Dylan Cease. If you could send us that one, I'd greatly appreciate it. Maybe it's just another tweet that came in. Let's see. Cease is a good pitcher, first and foremost. But as far as Cease to the Twins on a 1 year deal, the only way I see that happening is if there's a contract that they're trying to get off the books to send to San Diego, and San Diego isn't exactly looking to add payroll at this time. Now, if say they can do a long-term deal with Dylan Cease and get him signed long-term there with Minnesota or with San Diego, then I think that would be the preferred option. But I don't see that being a very likely situation because I think there'll be other teams that are going to be competing for a World Series that need a number one type pitcher that'll be offering more for Dylan Cease than whatever the Twins will ultimately offer. Sean, in your opinion, which one ends up with the Cubs, Jansen or Estevez? I'll go ahead and say add Kimbrel to your question too. Jansen, Kimbrel, or Estevez. I would say Jansen just because I think there's more interest in Estevez, and so they may want to save a little bit of money so they can add another bat. I think Estevez probably gets north of $20 million, or at least $10 million per season anyway, over 2 or 3 years. I think Jansen gets anywhere between 1 and 2 years, anywhere between $8 and $12 million per. I think that would be the cheaper way to go for the Cubs, and that would allow them to spend on another hitter as well. Kendrick, welcome in. Appreciate you joining us. Will there be more 100-game winning teams than last year? I'll go ahead and say no. I just don't think there are that many elite teams in baseball this year, and the teams that are elite are in very difficult divisions. So I think 100-game winners will be very rare. Graham, the Vasquez talk is interesting. San Diego is confusing me. Not difficult to do at times. They have issues, and I really don't see them even looking to add. I mean, San Diego always looks to retool. I keep telling you guys this. 1 year, the first year of AJ Preller's tenure, they bring in the Uptons, they bring in Kimbrel. Ultimately, it doesn't work out. They divest themselves of that situation and trade those guys on. Get some prospects back for their troubles. They try to get in on Juan Soto. They spend all their top prospects, some of their young major leaguers, already over to the Nationals. And that doesn't work out after 2 years. They ship him out to New York, get some prospects back in there as well. Now they get into Luis Arraez and Dylan Cease. Didn't work out last year, at least winning World Series. So now I think they're going to try to divest themselves of that situation. But just as easily, I think they'll get into another situation as well. So just because they traded Luis Arraez or they traded Dylan Cease does not mean they're not still looking to add. Now, the Vasquez angle here is the interesting one because I don't think there's much interest in him. I think the Twins are looking to offload salary. Vasquez at one time was a decent backstop behind the plate, was a decent hitter as well. Decent in air quotes. But catching offense around the entire sport is down overall. Vasquez has the potential to be at least better than league average offensively, and I guess that's the hope there if you're the San Diego Padres looking for some improvements behind the plate. But I don't really get the San Diego interest in Vasquez. I do get the reasons why the Twins would be looking to offload him to allow a roster flexibility, to allow Cartaya to get some playing time on the Major League roster this year. Rafe, a healthy Dodgers team, even remotely healthy, breaks the wins record? I don't think so. I will say the Dodgers, they're going to be without Kershaw for at least 2 months. They're going to be without Ohtani in their starting rotation for a little while as well. And I think it's going to take some time to figure out the mix in the outfield. I think they're going to bring in Dalton Rushing from the minor leagues to kind of break in at the big league level. I think Kim's going to have to get adjusted to the big leagues as well. I think Freeman's going to be working himself back from injury. Smith had a down year behind the plate. And then they got a lot of injury red flags in that rotation as well. I don't think it's a guarantee that even if healthy, that team wins more than what the Seattle Mariners did breaking the wins record. Now, do I think they win 100 games? I do. Do I think they win 110? That's a little bit more iffy. I'd probably put it around a 33% chance that they win more than 110 games. But more than 100, I think, is fairly certain. Per Dan Hayes, yes, Sean, will Jansen sign before spring training? Yes, he will. Cubs, I think, will solidify that bullpen well in advance of pitchers and catchers reporting, let alone spring training. D-Rod, I don't think there was a 100 winner in 2024. Wasn't there? I don't really remember. We can look it up here in a minute, though. Michael, how do you see the things playing out for the Athletics and Rays stadium situations? Do you see the current plans working out, or are there some doubts still? A lot of doubts with the Sacramento/Las Vegas A's. I still have my doubts as to whether or not the thing gets built. Now, they might be a team that's in limbo for the foreseeable future. Now, the Rays, depending on which day of the week it is, one day they say, oh yeah, we have a plan in place, we'll be back into Tropicana Field next year. I'm beginning to doubt that a little bit just because that's a lot of repair that needs to happen. I'm beginning to wonder if they try to find another site there and just play in the AAA ballpark or move around in that area for the next few years until they get something more long-term there. But I do think they'll stay in that Tampa Bay, St. Pete area. Graham, I could have seen the Yankees having interest in Vasquez if the money owed to him wasn't as high. We do need a backup to Wells. Honestly, again, Vasquez is a little bit better than your average backup to me. But with that $10 million price tag, I don't think the Yankees would even go near it. I think they're going to go the non-roster type of way. Narvaez, among others, who could have interest. Remember, they traded Jose Trevino, who had a lot less of a salary anyway, because he was a very comparable catcher behind the plate. Now, Vasquez is a little bit better hitter in my mind than Jose Trevino. But could they use an upgrade there at backup catcher? Sure. But the Yankees have bigger fish to fry. They're looking for a lefty reliever, looking for a middle infielder, or a third base infielder as well. One guy to kind of play both of those spots anyway, and maybe an eighth inning guy. But the primary thing they're trying to do is get rid of that Stroman deal to where they can make other moves as well. Sean, could Jaden Daniels make the Super Bowl as a rookie? Good question. He's playing the best out of all of them right now. I mean, he is the best quarterback in the playoffs so far, and it's not close. Josh Allen's been good, but Jaden Daniels has been on another level. Hurts, to me, I don't really trust Philadelphia too much, but I do trust Saquon Barkley to be able to handle that Washington Commanders defense. As much as I love the defenders that they have over there, Armstrong that they brought over from the Cowboys, Fowler they brought over from the Cowboys, Bobby Wagner is their middle linebacker, Dan Quinn is their head coach. Really like the way they built up that team, but I think Saquon runs roughshod over that ball club there. Rafe, Ty France for sure retiring next season if he don't get signed. Possibly, but we've got so many of those type of players. Joey Gallows of the world, the Anthony Rizzos that could be 1 year away from retirement, if not hitting retirement already this year, just because, again, first base DH types just don't get paid anymore. And that's why, Pete Alonso is trying to, raise the, overall salary for first baseman to the highest AAV anyway. That way it would set the floor, or set the groundwork anyway, for Vlad Guerrero to absolutely reset the market for first baseman next year. That's something to kind of keep in mind as well. Rafe, Barkley deserves a Super Bowl ring, but Phillies fans don't. Again, as a Cowboys fan, I have my thoughts on Philadelphia fans, but Barkley, he's just on another level right now as a running back. Graham, what do you think about one person not voting for Ichiro? Are they ever going to reveal themselves? Honestly, this would be the changes I'd make to the Hall of Fame voting. If you want to vote at all for the Hall of Fame, you have to consent to to allow your vote to be given away publicly. Period. And it's not to ridicule the other person. It's not for any of those other reasons. Not to scrutinize the validity of your vote. It's the ability to make sure that the votes themselves, like for instance the one guy who missed on Ichiro Suzuki. What's the reasoning behind it? Now, sure, you might point to his numbers and say he didn't hit enough doubles. He didn't hit enough home runs. Well, even so, he still was good enough to be a Hall of Famer. Contact, what he meant to that team, speed on the base pass. He was an all-around player as well. Had a gold glove, or what was he, a 10-time gold glover? I mean, the guy was a Hall of Famer, period, through and through. Maybe they just had 10 guys on their ballot and they knew Ichiro was going to get in, and so they left Ichiro off to get the 10 votes out there. But I would still like to see each and every single one of the ballots because it's an honor to vote for the Hall of Fame. And it should not be protecting you as a voter because you want to make sure your name isn't, sullied, or you're worried that your reputation will take a ding because of how your vote was recorded. But come on, man, I think we can all agree Ichiro Suzuki should have been a unanimous Hall of Famer. Now, if say you're the guy that had 10 guys voted for in that Hall of Fame ballot, and you left off Ichiro because you believed he would get enough votes to get in anyway, I suppose I could buy that argument, but at a certain point, you vote for the Hall of Famers, period. You don't vote for a guy to stay on the ballot. I know there are some people who vote for players just for that reason, for them to stay in contention on the ballot a little longer. I think the vote should strictly be, 1, is he a Hall of Famer to you? 2, do you think this guy should be a Hall of Famer, even if you don't necessarily think they should be? If the general consensus is this player is a Hall of Famer, put them in the Hall of Fame, or do you believe a player should be a Hall of Famer, not just left on the ballot, just as a nice career kind of thing? Just getting on the ballot is a successful thing for a player. 10 years of service time is nothing to sneeze at. And these players getting on the ballot is an honor in and of itself, just like getting the honor to vote on the Hall of Fame is an honor in and of itself as well. But again, I do think these ballots should be made public in all circumstances. Okay. Let's see. Master Vinman, looking at Cubs' March and April regular season schedule, they could end up in last place in the Central starting in May. I mean, that Central division, I think it could go in any direction. Cardinals are going to be the one team, I think, that by the end of the 162 will be at the bottom there because they're going to be relying on a bunch of young guys, both in that lineup, in that bullpen, and in that rotation. I think this is going to be a year for development for them. But outside of that, even the Cardinals, when they go through a rebuild phase, I don't think they're going to be a 60-win ball club by any stretch. And so any one of these teams could be at the top or bottom of that division throughout the regular season. I don't think we'll have a clear idea of who's winning that division until like the final week of the season. Let's see here. Graham, I agree. Make the votes public. Then you have to justify your picks, etc., which you should be able to do. Absolutely. Besides, it's an honor. I can't stress this enough. It's an honor even to be able to vote. I know one of you guys was saying, hey, how long till you get until I get my Hall of Fame vote? I mean, I would love to have that, but I haven't even begun to even fathom the idea of being a Hall of Fame voter. That would be a very long way off. I'd have to register with the BBWAA anyway. I'll put it this way. That's never going to happen. I don't expect that to ever happen anyway. Would it be awesome? Absolutely. But just as it's an honor to be on the ballot for these players, congratulations, a time to celebrate their careers. It's just as equally an honor to be able to vote for those players into the Hall of Fame. And as a result, that vote should ultimately be made public. This isn't the the state secrets or anything like that. This is the Hall of Fame vote. Let's get those out there in the public eye. Rafe, man, I wish Kinsler did more so he could be in the Hall of Fame. But hey, the Hall of Very Good at least. I would agree there. Kinsler for me is in the Hall of Very Good. I would say Pedroia is a player that got some votes got a few more votes than Kinsler this year. I view them very similarly as far as their careers, as far as their talent level, as far as what they did on the field. I'd say Pedroia was a little bit more of a leader with the Red Sox, which is why I would have given my vote to a Pedroia, even though I'm a Rangers fan. I think Kinsler's in that Hall of Very Good. Sean, when does Arenado get traded and to where? Before the start of the regular season. I was hoping before the start of spring training. That's looking a little bit more unlikely at this point. I think the Cardinals are waiting for a team to have an injury at third, first, or DH to open up the market here for Arenado, but I do expect him to be traded before the start of the regular season. Would you be surprised if the Eagles lost? No. I thought the Rams honestly should have won that game against the Eagles. Ultimately, they just fell a little bit short. The way that final drive was looking, it looked like Stafford had the Eagles right where he wanted them. One negative play really set that entire drive back and cost the Rams the ball game. Just two straight plays where the guy was able to rush right up the middle and allowed Stafford to get early pressure, and that was the difference in the game. And Eagles move on, and now they face the Commanders. The Commanders, like I said, Jaden Daniels has been the best quarterback in the NFL the whole playoffs so far, and we'll see if he can do it once again against the Eagles. But would I be surprised if the Eagles lost? No, just because of how good Jaden Daniels has been so far this playoff run. Graham, next year's Hall of Fame class voting might be interesting. It will. I think we're going to see a nice rise for Utley. I think we're going to see a nice rise and over the line anyway for Andrew Jones, Carlos Beltran, players like that. Andy Pettit got a nice run this year as well. And Manny Ramirez will finally fall off the ballot after next year as well. So some things to kind of keep in mind there. Rafe, next year's class is some hot buns. I haven't looked too hard at the class next year, but I'm sure there's at least one or two guys that will be worthy of consideration. Felix Hernandez had a nice debut on the ballot this year as well. And for those of you who didn't see the news anyway, the Hall of Fame class this year has 3 more inductees that will be added. Billy Wagner finally gets the call in the final year of eligibility on the ballot this year. He will be joined anyway by CC Sabathia and missing unanimous decision anyway, Ichiro Suzuki by 1 vote anyway. He didn't get unanimously elected there either. But really good class anyway. I was hoping we'd get one more in there like Carlos Beltran. His numbers dropped way too much though for that to happen. I think he will get in the next year or two though. Sean, does Scherzer and Alonso end up with the Jays? I would say one of the 2 bats ends up with the Jays. We're talking Bregman or Alonso. I think they end up with one of those 2 at this point. And then I think the Blue Jays end up with at least one of Pivetta, Flaherty, and Scherzer. They may end up with 2 of those guys as well. But the biggest issue for them, of course, say it with me, the offseason begins and ends with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Can they get that extension done before the start of spring training? Alrighty, appreciate you guys joining us this evening. We'll be live again tomorrow night around 9 o'clock, so be sure to join us live every single night as we break down the latest from MLB's Hot Stove and throughout the regular season as well. Follow us on X at UpsideSN and on Facebook, Upside Sports Network. Tomorrow night we'll dig into a little bit more on the transactions. Hopefully we'll have something to discuss around Alex Bregman and Pete Alonso. Would love to see that decision finally happen as well. But we'll get into some trade talk as well, dig into some of the rest of the free agent class, and dig into some of the holes that are left on these rosters, and see which free agents, maybe you could sign on a bargain deal to fill the holes on your roster. We're not talking about, hey, this is the linchpin that wins us the World Series type of moves. We're talking about moves that'll get you to have a solid roster, 1 through 9 in your lineup, get you to fill a much-needed hole in that bullpen, get you to get a number 4 or 5 starter for that rotation to give yourself some length. Those are the types of things we'll be discussing. And hopefully, like I said, we'll have some movement on Bregman and Alonso. Flaherty as well I'd love to see his decision get made as well. Rangers are still looking for a closer. I'd expect them to make a decision on that here in the next week as well. Maybe we'll get the Kirby Yates financial numbers as well. But appreciate you guys joining us tonight. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe. Follow us on X at UpsideSN and on Facebook, Upside Sports Network. Y'all have a great night out there, everybody. Stay warm, everyone.